Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that increases your earning potential. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Atlanta, Georgia.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent in North Carolina. It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2020. Happy New Year.
Yay.
And welcome to episode number 101. Are you an independent or dependent student? In this week's news, why college students should work, but only 12 hours. And we're in chapter 101 of 171 answers, and we're answering whether your child will be considered an independent or dependent student. And this week's question is from a mom who wants to know how to weigh asking teachers who know your child best to write their recommendations, but may not be that experienced in letter writing. And Mark kicks off his interview with Mr. Travis Hornsby, founder of the country's top student loan debt resource and Student Loan Planner Part 1.
Good morning, listening family. And Anika and I want to wish everybody a very, very, very happy new year. We sincerely hope that this will be the absolute best year of your life. And Anika, this is not just a new year. This is a new decade. This is a new decade.
Wow.
So I got two questions for you, but you can take either one.
Okay.
Either any resolutions for the decade or any reflections on the previous decade.
I feel like we just talked about this.
I know, but that was a year ago. I remember the before that in our first one where we were talking about our weight loss and staying on it and all that and sticking to it and all that. And you said check in a couple months.
But you know what? I do have one that's pretty hardcore. And I have actually been talking through and working through with now a new friend who's, dealing with the same life situations. And we are really serious about our health. Like work life has just taken over. It continues to take over. It's never going to stop. We've heard these things about, and which I totally believe there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's work-life integration. And so how are we going to integrate our lives together, work and personal and just make it work? And we have got to health is wealth. And it's just, it's critical. It's gotten to that. So yes, I'm putting that down for I'm putting it down for 2019 at this very moment that we're recording, but yeah, putting it down for 2020.
It reminds me, I was listening to Warren Buffett, the famous investor, Berkshire Hathaway, and he's 89 now, and he was on a great interview. And then the interviewer said to him, what's your best advice for, it's the same question I always ask our interviewees, but she asked him that. And his response was, you only have one mind and you only have one body. And you can't start getting it together at age 50. That's basically what he said,
Right.
So that's kind of reminds me of what you're saying. For me, this is like a decade commitment for me. I need to have the exact same one you had, by the way, triple underscored, neon lights. But the one that I'm most passionate about right now is philanthropy and charity. And you're a 40-something, I'm a 50-something. So chances are, unless I make it to be over 100, I'm on the back nine of my life. And, and you start to think about what your legacy is going to be and what you're going to leave behind. And so you don't even know this, Anika, but I just made a $100,000 commitment over the next 10 years to the school that my kids went to.
Oh, nice.
So they're establishing a joy fund in my youngest daughter's name and a cares fund in my oldest daughter's name.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited about it. Yeah. So the joy fund is going to help under-resourced kids who are struggling to stay at the school because they can't afford it anymore. And so they're going to have to leave, and that'll pull money so that they can return the next year. And Karis is Miss Missionary, right? So she went to Honduras 4 times and Kenya twice. And so the Cares Fund is going to also target under-resourced kids who can't afford to go on, because those trips weren't cheap. Like the Africa trips are almost $4,000 a piece.
Right.
But it's going to take an under-resourced kid who can't afford to go on a mission trip and cover their costs, especially if they've never been out of the country. So it's the first time they've ever kind of had a chance to go out of the country and do something like that.
So inspiring, Mark. That is awesome. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And then I also made a new pledge that this one is less expensive, but it's still nevertheless a new one. And I applied it this morning. So I took Karis and Joy back, of course, for, Christmas, New Year's. And so we all went out to Cracker Barrel this morning. And I'm committed now to giving 25% to waitresses unless they jack me up. And I'm not doing it if you just jack me up with terrible service. But as long as it's just decent, That's just a little thing to do charity because, you used to do payroll sales for paychecks like 20 plus years ago now. And you know that waitresses and that get like $2.83 an hour?
Oh, yeah, no.
$2.14. Yeah. I think it's $2.83, but $2.83 an hour. So they rely on tips. So
that
just
actually
a little
sounded
thing.
high. I thought it was a little more less than that.
Yeah, it's I think it's 2.83. It's 2 something. And, I used to be like, I'm kind of been a 20% tipper for the most part, but I'm just going to add up a little 5% more. So it's not major, but it's major if I'm going to a nice restaurant.
Very nice.
Try to be charitable. So hold me accountable. Okay. This is like my decade pledge to be really magnanimous moving forward. So awesome stuff. Also want to shout out a few people who sent photos in for our photo gallery recently. We had Lorraine Sisto from Connecticut, Sylvia Borgo, and Carrie Russ, both from California, and Simi from Pennsylvania, Simi Situ. So send in these photos. We call ourselves our listening family, and we're taking photos of all of our listening family and putting them up on our website in the photo gallery. And we are enjoying them coming in. And please, if you're a regular listener, or even if you're an occasional listener and you want to be part of our listening family, please send in your photo. And what's the web address, Anika?
YourCollegeBoundKid.com.
Questions at YourCollegeBoundKid.com, though, for the email.
Oh, yeah.
I said the web address. That's on me. I set you up for that one. I said, what's the web? And then I asked for the email. That one's on me. So questions at YourCollegeBoundKid.com. And nowadays, with your iPhone, Android, just snap a natural shot. We're not looking for any non-professional. Just whatever you want to do. So, or you can just do your LinkedIn photo or whatever. Whatever floats your boat. Mm-hmm. For our admission tip, I want you to Google the strategic plan for any schools that you're considering. And it's incredible what you'll learn there. You'll learn a wealth of information about where this school is going, what they're planning. Some schools' strategic plans are 5 years out, some are 10, some are 15, some are 20. But you want to know the big picture of where are they going. It'll really let you know what their priorities are. And you'll get some rich why us or why this school information from that. It helps in interviews and just it helps you kind of figure out, like, is this school like number 1 on my list or number 3? So Google the strategic plan. Ever thought about that one, Anika?
I haven't. Well, kind of, sort of, because of you, but no. Yeah, no, that's great. Mean? No, I mean, I've heard you say that before. Yeah, I've heard you say that before. But it's a good reminder though, because I think Naya's settled in where she's going, but we'll see.
Right. But what's amazing is what you learn. Like you will learn really, really good stuff. Mm-hmm. And the admission vernacular. Now, this one is I'm not even going to ask you to guess this one. This one will make you laugh. So the word is fly. And it's not, remember people used to say you're fly, like you're cool, you dress fly?
Oh, goodness.
It is not that. Fly. and it is an abbreviation, FLI. And it's a term you'll hear some schools use, some admission offers, and it refers to first-gen low income. First, like our fly kids, our first-gen low income kids.
Okay.
Fly is the term admission officers use. So that's the word of the day, fly.
All righty, fly.
And as we said last week, Nick and I are taking a little bit of break for Christmas and New Year's on our college spotlights, doing a little shorter episode for you. So Christmas, New Year's, passing on the college spotlights, but we're picking them up again next week. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article is entitled Why College Students Should Work, but Only They Should Work 12 Hours. And this is written by Miss Libby Miller. It's found on nitrocollege.com. And first of all, Mark, I really enjoyed reading this article because it offers such a clear and balanced approach to considering your child working while they're in school. So literally up until that moment of me reading this, I mean, seriously, I have been like, no, Janaea, no way. You are not going to work while you're in school. And I've been pretty adamant about that. But I mean, obviously, internships and things like that are critical. But just thinking about taking on a part-time job was just not, it just didn't make sense to me. But how about this research that they shared from the Department of Education that found that students who actually worked 12 hours or less, they had stronger grades. And I mean, the writer overall just did a really great job of weighing the pros and cons of working. And she even goes on to suggest that your child really needs to assess, each semester, like reassess, or is this still something that I can handle? It's because your workload changes, through, your class courses change or whatever. So I just highly, highly encourage everyone to read this. I found it extremely helpful. What did you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, it's succinct, got the brevity, but it's right to the point. And I'll tell you another point the article made that I really liked. I'll read this, it's short. It says, consider your student's target major or field. If your child wants to pursue a career in healthcare, part-time work as an EMT or a hospital worker could help supplement their studies by giving them hands-on vocational experience. The same is true for elementary education majors who work in childcare. Students who are considering graduate school in research-heavy fields like economics and biology, they might consider reaching out to their professors to see if they have any positions available as research assistants or teaching assistants, especially in their junior and senior years. And I thought that was also a really good point because I'll always remember Courtney. It's a student I worked with. In fact, ended up working with the fourth member of her family now. So it's pretty cool. I'm on to the fourth member of that family, but she was the oldest and the first one in that family. And she went to Vanderbilt. And then when she went to Vandy, and she told me that she's like, Mark, I wasn't just going to go get a job in the dining room. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to get a job related to my major. So she was very interested in medical field. So she got a medical research job. And she had it for all 4 years at Vandy. And then she changed her mind and wanted to pursue medicine when she was there, like, a lot of kids do. So she graduates. She comes back to Atlanta, where she's from. And she ends up getting a really good professional job. So she calls me. She's all excited. We end up going to lunch. And then I said, well, how much do you think going to Vanderbilt, which is a brand name school, and especially in the South, also nationally? So how much do you think going to Vanderbilt helped you get that job? And she's like, to be honest, I don't really know if that really made a difference. But you know what did? My 4 years of doing medical research at Vandy. Because, the person wrote an incredible recommendation for her.
Right.
And so the point is, you can oftentimes use your jobs to advance your career. So I thought that was a point that the article made that was good. And now the other thing, the main point of the article, which I think is really good as well, was the research that shows working 12 hours or less actually helps grade point averages. But research also shows 15 hours or more hurts grade point averages.
Right.
And I can relate to that. I can relate to that on a personal level in a lot of ways. First of all, I went through times, Anika, where I worked and times I didn't work, both in undergrad and grad school. And I found it was easier when I was working to have structure in my day and to be disciplined. Because the thing about college is you may have all your classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and literally have nothing to do Tuesday, Thursday.
Right.
And if you have nothing to do Tuesday, Thursday, it's really easy to do nothing when you have, if you're not working, if you don't have some built-in structure like that.
Right.
So this intuitively made sense to me. And I actually noticed it myself when I was going through school. Like, I wasn't aware of the research then. But I remember at first I thought, I'm not going to work. This is going to be great. I have enough money not to work. And then I'm like, my grades aren't as good. I feel like I'm undisciplined. So I remember like having the mental thought like, wow, it's actually easier for me to be more productive working. So I can definitely relate to that. Now, I have a question for you because, you've shared your story in here before, Nika, how you pretty much worked full time going through college. So do you think that jaded you? And is that the reason why you had such an aversion to NAIA working? Because you've seen the dangers of too much work and you thought working too much? Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's the prism through which you're looking at and thinking her. Because when you work in full time, it had to be extremely hard to do that and go to school.
You're at night.
Yeah.
So, but to your point about providing structure,
yes.
I do, as I reflect on that, it did provide structure for me.
Yeah.
Because I could have just not been going to school. Like I could have just been, living somewhere doing something else.
Yeah.
So I hadn't reflected on that from that aspect before. It was more so, okay, I was just working too much and I didn't engage with the life of the school the way I should have and, and optimize on all the offerings of the school itself. So, yeah, so I saw that. So there still was good and bad in that. But it's just, but let me ask you a question now. So what's the difference between pursuing a part-time job and an internship? Because essentially they're the same. They could be the same thing if you're like, the Courtney example, when you're working in your area. Like, how do you make that distinction, or do you have to make that distinction? Because
well, you don't have to, but generally when people think of an internship, they think of something that's advancing your career.
Right.
Right. So, for example, one job Joy had, she doesn't have it now, but she worked at a shoe store in the mall when she was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not anything even remotely related to what she wants to do with her life. It was just a job.
All right.
And by the way, this is slightly off topic, but it's kind of related. One thing you have to be careful with is taking a job with an employer that is not sensitive to the school demands.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the thing that she had. Like, hey, I don't care that you had an exam tomorrow. I got, shifts were like 8 hours. And she actually violated this principle because she wanted money. She turned around and said to me, Dad, I'm working 32 hours a week. I said, what? What do you mean you're working 32 hours?
Wow.
So I lasted one semester. And she did well in school, but she didn't do much anything else. And it probably wasn't good for sleep and quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that lasted one semester. Now she still has a job, but it's like 10 hours, and she's working for a very, very sensitive employer.
Okay.
That, shifts are 3 to 4 hours. If you have exams, everybody can just put so it's still not in her career. I mean, so it's still, I would differentiate that and call that a job. She works at Old Navy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's just at Old Navy, gets a little 10 hours in and makes a little bit of pocket change.
Right.
So ideally, it'd be good to do something completely career related, but that doesn't always work out.
But again, going back to that practical approach of structure, like I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just had not thought of it that way before. So,
yep, there we go. Awesome. As Anika likes to say, there it is.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we are in our 101st episode. My mother's an English teacher. She would have had my head on that one on a platter. Oh, my mother's one of these people, Anika, you better not make a grammatical error around her.
Oh.
She will correct you in a New York second.
No pressure.
Yeah, like you better not confuse I or me or, you know what I mean? It's like that's her pet peeve is grammar errors. So we are in the 101st episode in the 101st chapter of my book. And the name of the chapter / our discussion here is, how do I know whether I am a independent or a dependent student? Anika, you read the chapter. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I was the person that was working against those myths about why I considered myself independent, as you listed in the beginning of the chapter.
So why don't you explain that myth? Because this is one of the biggest misconceptions out there. I don't know, do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I mean, it was because it was me. Hey, listen, I'm living on my own. I'm paying my own bills, and I have not talked to my parents about paying for college ever. So yes, I'm independent.
I'm an independent.
There, right? Like that's it. That's what it was. But clearly, that's not it.
So when did you find out that living on your own, paying your own bills, not communicating with your parents doesn't make you an independent student? When did you find that out?
Well, honestly, you know what? I don't think I ever did. I'm just going to be straight up 100 with you, because I just eventually just grew up and kept on rolling. So eventually I did become independent. It's just at that point in time, I didn't have to make the distinction, I guess, at whatever point.
Well, that's why you had to work so much, because your bills were high.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's one of the big myths, right? The big myth is that a student can declare themselves as an independent student simply by doing one of the following 3 things: living on their own, 1, 2, being responsible for their own bills, or 3, saying that their parents refuse to help them pay for college. In other words, students think that the word independent is the literal word independent. And another myth is that if you're not claimed on the taxes, then you're also independent. Like the definition of being a dependent on tax reform on your tax return is not the same as the FAFSA definition. So those are a couple myths. So how does a student then know, Anika, whether they're an independent or a dependent student?
Well, let's see. You got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 questions on here, I think, that you can just answer yes to, and that will make you an independent. Well, that will help you determine whether you're an independent. So do you want to quickly read through these?
Yeah, let's just read through them because they're really short. Okay. And I'll say something about these. There's over 100 questions on the FAFSA. And one of the reasons why there are 112 questions on the FAFSA, these are a bunch of them right here. Like every FAFSA, you're asked these questions And if you say yes to any of them, then you're an independent.
All right.
So why don't we just go through them really quickly, Anika?
Okay, so the first one is, are you a graduate student?
Mm-hmm.
The second one is, are you married?
Yeah.
3, are you on active duty in the armed forces?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a military veteran?
Mm-hmm.
Are you 24 or older?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have children and provide at least 50% of their support?
Mm-hmm.
Are you an emancipated minor?
Mm-hmm.
Is your legal guardian not one of your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Are you an orphan in foster care or a ward of the court since age 13?
Mm-hmm.
Are you homeless or at risk of homelessness? Do you have an incarcerated parent? That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final one is, there are times when your status is not crystal clear and you will need to contact your college. How about that?
Yeah, and the one thing I want to say about that that's really important is, as much as that might seem black and white, those criteria, is not always black and white. You know, there are times that it's not, and you can appeal for what's called a dependency override.
Okay.
And that's where, and what happens with that is the financial aid officer is empowered by the federal government to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's for the federal government is because if you turn around and become an independent, you could all of a sudden qualify for the largest Pell Grant, which is $6,345 a year, which is the government paying for it. So basically, the government is the one who's going to have to come up with the money. So if the financial aid officer determines that you're an independent, then the federal government, is going to give you more, need-based free money. And so they are empowered to do that. So it's a pretty solemn oath that they take, because one violation of it and they can lose their job. But but in general, the Department of Education, they're not looking over their back. They're saying, these are the criteria that are used, and we know there's some mushy stuff in the middle, and we're going to empower you to make that decision. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. So, Anika, can you think of a time when it could be like a little mushy?
I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. Give us an example.
Well, one of the ones, for example, are you homeless or at risk of homelessness? Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So how exactly is that determined?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you need letters from homeless shelters and different things like that.
Oh, wow.
But it's not as simple as just coming in and saying, hey, look, I don't have any place to say I'm homeless.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is that can be a lot. There can end up being a lot of gray, when it comes to a situation like that.
Right.
Some of these are really straightforward. Are you married?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By the way, are you 24 or older? It's asking what your age is December 31st of that award year.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I think the bottom line is people need to understand that just because you're living on your own and you're paying your bills and your parents are not contributing, that doesn't make you independent. The one thing I do want to say about this, Anika, and I always feel bad because let's say you have a parent who legitimately refuses to pay for college.
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with this before. And, from a kid's perspective, it's like, wait a minute. My parent is not paying for college. Like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to help me out? Because I can't come up with that money.
Right.
Unfortunately, it is the responsibility of a parent to contribute their fair share. So that in of itself will not result in you getting a dependency override or you getting more free money. It's just sort of like, I'm sorry, but they're not doing their job. And
wait, are you saying it's a legal responsibility? Like we can sue our parents if they
no,
refuse
it's
to pay?
not a legal responsibility. Just like it's not a legal right. It's a legal right to go to a high school or an elementary or middle school if you're not 18, and like that's a legal right that you have. It's not a legal right that you're entitled to have to go to college as an adult. But what I'm saying is, if you look at it from a kid's perspective, the way the kid thinks is like, how in the world am I supposed to pay this? Let's just say it's a state school and it's like $30,000 or even less. How in the world am I supposed to pay that money? Like my parent legitimately says they're not paying.
Right.
And you're basically screwing your kid over then, because if you think like by doing that, then the school is going to come back and say, well, I guess we're going to have to come up with the money because obviously you can't. So let's help out. It's not like going to the emergency room at a hospital without health insurance. And there's like this moral oath, to serve anybody. And so if you have health insurance or not, if you're in the emergency room, we're going to help you. It's not that mindset when it comes to this. If your parent doesn't do it, then you either do what you did, work 40 hours a week, or go to community college, or you don't go. So anyway, this is negative. This is the new year. We're supposed to be in good year cheer and celebrating with toasts and champagne or whatever.
Good New
Watch
Year
next services.
reality.
But let's get off this topic.
Good New Year reality. We'll take it.
Yeah. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. This week's question is from Miss Karen in California. And Mark, I previewed Karen's question as one, but she actually has a 2-pronged question. So I'm going to go ahead and just read it verbatim. So, look at that. I have a couple questions about letters of recommendation, if you don't mind. So my son is considering a computer science major. Would asking for a letter of recommendation from his computer science teacher, who's also his robotics mentor, be considered a core subject letter? And the second part is the one that I previewed, Mark, is how do you weigh asking a seasoned teacher who knows the letter, the ropes of writing good recommendation letters versus asking a less experienced teacher who might know your child better? So
Karen, thank you from California. We get such incredible questions that our listeners send in. But for some reason, Anika, this touched me as like one of the best questions we've had. I just think I think her part 1 and her part 2 are both really, really, really good questions.
Okay.
So let's take them. So, I oftentimes use this really hackneyed phrase. I just rush through it like, robotically because I'm so used to saying it, where I say your core teachers are math, science, English, history, foreign language. I say it so fast. And if you take that in a literal sense, okay, so your core are literally just math, science, English, history, foreign language. Well, in reality, it's a little broader than that, right? So I probably shouldn't say just history, because actually a humanities or a social science class is good for that bucket. That's considered core.
Okay.
So classes like government would be core, economics would be core, and computer science falls in there as well.
Okay.
So computer science is a core class, and it is. Now, art's not, music's not, fitness isn't, but any of those are core classes. And the reason why she's asking this is because many, many schools will tell you for your teacher recommendation, we want it to come from a core teacher. So the answer is computer science absolutely would check that box, and it would be absolutely fine to have a recommendation from a computer science teacher. Now, did that surprise you, Nika, or would you have thought that I was going to say something different on that?
It did surprise, because just to your point, you always say it so fast.
I know. I know.
Those 4 areas. If it's not in those 4 areas, then keep it moving. Yeah, it is.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a little bit broader than that, right? But so while we're on this, let's talk about a couple other things that make for a great rec writer. I know we've talked about that before, but if people didn't hear that episode, it's such an important topic. I want to hit on a couple of things. So in particular, in Karen's question, she said the computer science teacher also happens to be her son's robotics mentor. So that's always great, right? Like one of the things that makes a great recommendation writer is that they know you outside of the class or they've seen you in different capacities. You can't always get it, but I'm just talking, this is like if we were creating like the quintessential, optimal, ideal rec writer, they would have like all these features. They would know you outside of the class, know you in different capacities. They would, of course, have taught you in 11th or 12th grade. Okay. If it's 10th grade, it should be an advanced class, like an AP class or something like that. And they should also have been continued interaction with you from 10th to now so they can speak about what you're like currently. They should be someone who ideally taught you, if you're applying to competitive school, taught you in a more advanced class, even if it's 11th and 12th. It shouldn't be, okay, in 11th grade, I went back and I took French 1 because I wanted to get a double language and I was already up to Spanish 4. No, this should now be into more advanced level work. They should know you well. It should be a class where you have contributed a lot. So if it's class participation a lot or speaking up, or if it's more lab-based, you should be very, very active and have a very vocal presence in the class. They should be what I call a raving fan. Like they should be enthusiastic about you. They should be someone for whom, when you ask them to write a rec letter, they actually feel like they are doing you, like you are doing them a favor, not they are doing you a favor. You're actually, I always say that wrong. Am I saying it right? Like they're doing you a favor by giving you the privilege of writing on your behalf because they would be so delighted to do it. I think I got that. Yeah. Yeah. Some other things that you should look for is that they should be a really good writer. And the last thing I'll say is that they should be responsible and reliable. There shouldn't be somebody that you have to like be concerned that you're going to have to keep reminding them, or they may in fact not even do it. And the last thing, notice, Anika, that I never said that it should be your highest grade or that you should even have the highest grade in the class. Notice that was not on the list. A lot of times, actually, it's good if you've had some struggle and they can talk about how you have surmounted that struggle. So any thoughts on anything I said there?
Well, I think it's a great segue into the second part of her question, in that, you know, if you have this teacher that does really well, but they may not be as enthusiastic, they may not be, you know, know you so well, but they write great letters. You know, they have that, I guess they have a reputation. I don't know how you know that person writes great letters, and then you have the teacher that does know you in and out, that does, you know, can talk about how you know, have persevered in whatever study you're doing, but they just don't get, like, they're not good letter writers, and they don't have the counseling staff to coach them on it. Like, there's just something there that's missing, that you're concerned about them actually being able to write well on your child's behalf.
So this is one reason why I like this class. I like this question so much. I mean, I like the part one. The computer science question was a really good one, but this one was just as good, if not even, I don't say better, but it was just such a great question. And so I want to read exactly what she said again. How do you weigh asking a seasoned teacher who knows the letter of rec ropes, so they got the system down, versus asking a new, less experienced teacher, but they happen to know you better? In other words, what trumps what? Is it better that they know you, or is it better that they are like, you know, they got this writing thing down? That's not an easy question. So let's kind of unpack it a little bit. So one of the things I would try to do in this situation is I would try to look for cues as to whether the newer teacher was a good writer. Because the fact that they know you better is very powerful. So if they know you better, just because they're maybe not as experienced, I wouldn't assume they're not a good writer. They are a teacher. They may be a very good writer. So any ideas how you might try to figure out if they're a good writer?
I mean, I guess it depends on, I mean, if you're talking about a math teacher and an English teacher, I mean, I guess you've seen something that they've published before or something. I don't know. I mean, because the letter writing seems to me so distinct apart from other things. Like, how do you know that they're a bad writer? Like, I don't know how you pick up on that.
So it's not an easy question, but I'll tell you a couple ways you can get some cues. One is, and I don't know if this person is new as in they've been at the school for 6 months, 3 months. I don't know that. But let's assume that they're not that new. Let's assume that they've been there for 2 or 3 years. So one of the things is to go to your counselor and see if they have any experience at all with that person as a letter writer. there's a chance if they're not new, that they've done some other recommendation before and the counselor has seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that tends to be much more prevalent in private schools, smaller teacher-student ratios than in big public schools, but it's worth asking about. Second thing is, and once again, this is something you'll find a lot more in private schools than public, where they actually send comments home. Have there been, if there have, like where you're at, where both your kids are at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things where they went, both your kids went to boarding school. And at boarding schools, every teacher writes like a paragraph multiple times a year describing how your child is doing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything at all like that, look for how they write there. There's a big difference in writing styles if you compare teachers in those comments. But once again, most people are not in those type of environments. Another thing to look for is, I know this might seem trite and unreliable, but what are they like even in email correspondence? Has there been any email correspondence? And then the fourth thing is, how good are they as a teacher? Because generally people that are very clear and good at explaining things verbally as a teacher, there's a correlation between people that can communicate well verbally and they can communicate well in writing.
Mm-hmm.
So if those would be the things I would look for, and if the younger, more zealous teacher who knows you well, if they're enthusiastic about you and they're also check those boxes, that would be the direction that I would actually lean. But this is not an easy question, because I like the fact that the other person knows the rec writing ropes well, but they don't know you as well.
Right.
So what do you think, Anika?
I mean, so to that point, what are they going to write about? I mean, I can write a heck of a paragraph, but if I'm not saying much.
Well, that's why I lean toward the person that knows you better. But but here's the thing to keep in mind as well. For teacher recommendations, schools are mostly looking for you to write about the classroom experience of the student. Like if you look at Yale, they actually put this on their website, that they want teachers to concentrate on the student in the classroom environment and what they're like there.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that bringing in a little bit about the out of classroom experience is a bad thing. In fact, generally it's a good thing because you can also speak to character.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, the main thing they're looking for is you as a learner. What kind of learner are you? How do you think?
Mm-hmm.
How do you interact with other classmates? Are you a leader? Are you a class participant? What's your class participant like? Those kinds of things are really what they're mostly looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But I still would lean toward the person that knows you better because of the extra subtleties that you can bring into the rec writing.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be very, very powerful.
Right. Well, I want to add, I'm always into the bigger picture thing, right? Because this is the thing. This is something that's important, not just for your child, but for every kid that interacts with that same person in your school. Mm-hmm. So here's an opportunity to get with your administration leadership, your principal, whoever the person is in your school, and say, hey, how are you addressing the professional development around our teachers writing our kids letters? That could be a PTA thing, could be just it could be a youth thing or whatever, but that's an important topic that should be addressed school-wide. So maybe that's, maybe through some Title III funds or whatever, the school can have something to do little workshops for all the teachers. Especially in the more, when you're not in these private settings, when you've got the counselors working with 1 billion kids that doesn't have the time or the bandwidth to be able to help and work with the teachers individually. That could be something that's on a broader school level. So that's just one way I would also think about it.
Yeah, and I got to shout you out. So for, those are first-time listeners or maybe even regular listeners, you may or not know this. I think I brought it up once. But when Nika was a middle school parent, she was the PTSA president.
Oh, God. So flashback.
You remember that? Flashback? You were the president. You sure were. So you were the person that was doing all this kind of stuff at your middle school to make sure all this stuff happened.
Yeah.
And so you did all that stuff. So I gotta shout you out because you're not. This is not just talk. You walk the walk.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
No, you have. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
It was a lot of work, and you grabbed the bull by the horns and brought in speakers and did all that stuff.
Well, yeah, and it's important.
I like this question because it's not an easy question. Because there are merits to the seasoned teacher who really knows the letter of rec writing ropes down, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of merits to that. But I also wouldn't assume that a younger teacher is incompetent. They're still a teacher. They're still educated.
Right.
And if they're a very good, some of the other things I mentioned may be difficult to get, right? The thing about having the comments or the counselor knowing a lot. But one thing that shouldn't be that hard to get is the students ability to ascertain whether or not the teacher is a very good verbal communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And that you should be able to figure out. And if they're a very good verbal communicator, they know you well, and they're a raving fan, I would assume that they can probably communicate well on paper as well.
Mm-hmm.
Friends, our interview today is with a very special young man, Travis Hornsby. He started out, he formerly was a bonds trader and actually had retired in his 20s. And then he just started helping one particular family with their significant student loan debt, showing them how they could, use more effective ways to absolve their debt. And that just grew and blossomed through word of mouth. And now he has arguably the largest practice in the country. He's worked with close to $1 billion of student loan debt and helping people use more effective strategies to get rid of that loan debt, putting them the best plan. And so if you're not someone with a lot of loan debt, a lot of your peers may be, friends may be, listen and seriously consider referring him if you're in that situation. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, I am here with Travis Hornsby. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Travis.
Yeah, great to be here, Mark.
Thanks. Travis has an associate, actually, who had heard about our podcast. She reached out to me, and I actually started doing a little digging around, looking at his backgrounds. He has a podcast as well. I listened to it. I liked what I heard. He's a specialty in all matters related to helping students get rid of substantial loan debt. So after listening a little bit more, I thought he's a great thought leader that our listening family would benefit from hearing. So before we jump into our topic for the day, though, Travis, why don't you give us a little bit about your background? Tell us a little bit about how you grew up and sort of how you became interested in this topic of student debt.
Sure. So I grew up in kind of a medium-sized town in the Florida Panhandle, had a lot of influential figures around me, but the main one was my grandfather, and he really got me into personal finance and investing, and I just really loved the space. And, I was thinking that because my dad was a teacher, my mom was a nurse, and actually when I was in high school, for the most of the time in high school, she wasn't working. So we were really on an income of like $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and I had two brothers. So I figured, well, I've got to cover my entire cost of my education myself. So I did a whole bunch of research and probably could have used your services back then, but that was a while ago. I didn't know you existed. And,
I wasn't in this forum back then.
Yeah, exactly. So I just, I applied to every school that had a merit scholarship that I possibly could, that, a prestigious merit scholarship that covered room, board, and tuition. So that's what I was kind of looking for. So I got one. I went to the University of Florida and got paid to go to school instead of paying tuition, thanks to one of the scholarship programs that they offered there. So I was very grateful for that. And some of the stuff on your site about, the PSAT and things like that, that test really matters. I mean, that test is one of the big reasons I think that I got a lot of the scholarship offers, just because of getting the schools just kind of automatically give you money if you get a certain score in that, I think, sometimes.
So were you a national merit or not?
Yeah, I was like, I think maybe a finalist, I don't think I was good enough to get the actual award. But, the finalist is, at least back when I was going to college, that's the one you really wanted, because that was the one that, all the colleges kind of fought over. And then you find out who the actual scholars were way down the line. And so, the schools just wanted to, I guess, put it in their brochures. They had this many national merit finalists going to their school. So I got, an offer from like University of Alabama. I got a couple offers from other big state schools in the area that I would have had to pay out of state tuition for. Instead, they kind of waived that and said, come for free. And that was just really, really awesome. So in terms of, going to school without having to take out debt, that was a huge blessing for me. So, your listeners are probably thinking, well, how did he get involved in student debt then if he didn't have to deal with it? Lucky guy.
Well, let me just say something. I'm impressed with you. You think you were being a little humble when you said you didn't know much. So most students don't know to, aggressively target merit scholarships like that as a high schooler. So that you should be commended for that.
Well, it was more of like a requirement. So, if my parents had been pretty well off, maybe the, desire and the need would have been there a little less. But my approach was, okay, my parents basically said, hey, we have no money, so good luck. And they had some prepaid tuition. Like I'm not giving them enough credit. Like they did prepare somewhat for college. But, when I was looking at schools and we were looking at Ivy Leagues and Vanderbilt and, Emory and some of these like prestigious higher cost schools, they're like, yeah, we're not going to be able to give you very good aid. In particular, I remember the importance of getting kind of help doing, figuring this stuff out, because I remember to this day that my mom messed up the FAFSA form for me because she put her retirement assets on the wrong line. And so she put her retirement assets as if it was like cash in the bank or something like that.
Very common, by the way. 35% of people make FAFSA errors, and that's a common one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she did that. And then I basically got terrible financial aid offers. And I think that based off of our tax return or something, like one of the schools offered me like almost like a complete, you can go, you're free, until they got my FAFSA. And they're like, oh, just kidding, you're rich. Like no award for you. And, it's just interesting that my mom was just trying to like report everything that she had. And she was trying to be honest, but didn't know that how to fill the FAFSA out because it's a super long, complicated thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, I went there, came out debt-free, because of my love of finance and bond trading. And I didn't have a love of bond trading at that point, but that's what I became. I became a bond trader for one of the world's largest mutual fund companies. So I went up to the Northeast and did that for a few years and became very proficient in Excel programming and analyzing large data sets and all that kind of stuff to make, active trading decisions. Traded about $10 billion of bonds, but that wasn't where my heart was.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's real money. And it was at times, very, very stressful. And it was very, very exciting. And it was not necessarily the kind of excitement that I was looking for, though, in a lifetime. And part of it was I felt like it was so difficult to get active return, and because there was just so many people competing in the space, and it was a tough job to eke out an extra, 0.05% or 0.1% of active return, And then in the student loan markets, though, I can frequently find people 5-6 figures of savings with these different forgiveness and income-driven repayment programs that exist. And that's not all that uncommon. So I'm having a much, much bigger impact doing what I do now than doing what I used to do. So in terms of like the missing link of how did I get started doing that, as my wife, she had a bunch of student loans for medical school. And that's what caused me to get into trying to figure out all these different loan forgiveness programs. And then she told me that I needed to help out her friends because they were confused.
Mm-hmm.
And this was around 2015 or so, and then launched the business in 2016. And then, have advised about $500 million of student debt since then with the team.
That's fantastic. And I hope our listeners heard you say, your heart was in there, because it's one thing we really, really try to emphasize is discovering your passion and going for your passion so that it doesn't feel like work. Obviously, you'll be better at it if you love it. You'll be good at it. And most likely you'll be good at it if you love it. And you'll put the sweat equity into, kind of master your craft, and people will be able to pick up your enthusiasm in what you do. And one thing that I really liked that you shared, Travis, when we were talking sort of in a little preamble before we started today is that, you approach your work as a ministry. We have that in common. We both see this as our calling and our service to humanity. And I think that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about Student Loan Planner. I think, our listeners know that you are helping students get rid of substantial debt, but maybe just expand a little bit on your range of services.
Sure. So we primarily help people with more than $50,000 balances. So I will fully admit that I know a lot of your listeners are going to be taking out undergrad level debt amounts. So, $30,000, $40,000, something like that. For those folks, we generally find that they don't necessarily need the help of a professional because you can just refinance those. You can get a $500 cashback bonus link. That's a big part of our business. It's probably about 30% of our business is focused on helping people get refinancing bonuses and at a lower interest rate. So that's a good, thing to do if somebody's got an emergency fund and they've got, a debt to income ratio that's, less than 1-to-1 on their income. If you owe more than what you're making, though, then there's a lot of opportunities to decide, well, do I go for this income-driven repayment options like revised pay-as-you-earn? Do I maybe file taxes jointly or separately from my spouse to exclude my spouse's income in the payment calculation? Do I go for forgiveness where I'm paying for decades on, my loans, and then I'm going to have to pay maybe income taxes on the forgiven burden? And what forgiveness program, if any, is best for me? So for that reason, most of our clients tend to be people who hold professional degrees because those are the people who have so much debt. We can save them literally tens of thousands of dollars on the average case by just going over how they're managing everything. And then we also are increasingly having a whole lot of parents that we're helping navigate Parent Plus loans because that is really causing a lot of problems. Just a prototypical example would be recently we had somebody had about $300,000 of Parent Plus loans because they took out Parent Plus loans for each one of their 3 kids to go to a private Catholic university in the Northeast.
Yeah, and I think we have talked about Parent Plus loans on this podcast probably as much as anything, at least 5 or 6 times, because it is a problem, and they're doing it for undergraduates. We also have a lot of college counselors who listen. So I think, the information that you're sharing is really apropos to our listener base.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, last week we shared Peter Van Buskirk's college admissions blog at score.com. And this week we have one of my absolute favorite college admissions blogs again. The recommended resource for episode 101 is the college admissions blog at CapEx. Now you can access this by going to capex.com/articles. That's C as in candy, A as in apple, P as in peanut butter, P as in peanut butter, E as in elephant, X as in x-ray.com/articles. And you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of well-written, accurate content. The blogs are colorful and real easy on the eyes in terms of font size, design, and color. But you will find the blog content is what really makes this blog outstanding. And it's divided into 6 categories: academics, money, college applications, testing, match and fit, and college life. I love this blog and I recommend it wholeheartedly without reservation. We will now return to my interview with Travis Hornsby. We're going to talk about something slightly different. It's related to the college loans, but it's something that you have some expertise in, and it's something that really can relate to a lot of our families, and that is, what should you know before you co-sign? So I think before we dive into that, Travis, start us out with the basics. Tell us what co-signing is and who can co-sign for a college loan.
So co-signing is basically when you are putting your credit on the line to help somebody borrow that otherwise would not be able to borrow at all or with as favorable terms. So, for example, in the private markets for student loans, especially for undergrad, you're really not going to find hardly any place in the world that'll give an 18-year-old money with their credit alone because they don't have any. Right. So for that reason, you're going to be asked to co-sign for your child if you're looking to take out private debt for undergrad. The benefit of that is, generally speaking, you're going to have a lower origination fee and a lower interest rate if you're putting your credit on the line as a parent compared to if you took out PLUS loans. Of course, I think it's pretty common knowledge that you want to maximize the Stafford loans that are available first, because those loans are in the name of the student, and you can also have that student pay based off his or her income when they graduate. So it's clearly better to maximize Stafford loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, for undergraduate first. And then for private loans, I would just be very, very cautious with those, because when you co-sign, you can't necessarily be sure that the person you're co-signing for is going to be able to make the payments. And if they're not able to make the payments, then you're on the hook for it. So that's the first point.
I have to tell you, I have a co-signing experience story. And it's one of those ones that's just indelibly emblazoned on my mind. So one of my students, I worked with all the way back. Like, I recruited her when I was doing boarding school admissions. I did her college process, got in a highly, highly selective college. I'm not going to mention this because it's a really personal story and you never know who knows who out there. And then she got out and she needed her first apartment, and she reached out to me asking me for some help, because credit wasn't good enough or whatever. So I ended up co-signing for her because she was literally like a daughter to me. And next thing I know, she runs into financial problems. And, I got the bill collector calling me and saying, you can ruin your credit, or you can step up, then, dude, and you're on this thing. So, so I had to shell out, which was, a pretty significant amount of money, because she fell behind. And until the lease ended, I was making those payments. And, I'm telling myself, I'll never do this again. And then I finally get to the end of the lease. I think it's done. And then they call me to say that, when they're cleaning the apartment up, there's like another $600 of repairs. So yeah, it made me extremely co-signing averse.
Yeah. So you're saying that you're living proof that you don't have to be related to somebody to co-sign.
Yes. So it's the same for college loans.
Yeah.
And our listeners, when Travis uses Stafford Federal Direct, those, just using those interchangeably, of course, that's the one loan undergraduate, that doesn't require a co-signer, which is so much different. But most of the time, if you want a private loan, which, you need to be careful with anyway. But if you're going there are always people I work with, Travis, even if I don't think they're making astute and sound decisions, they're like, look, we're going to do it. I had one parent say, look, Stucker, I've heard you. I get the point. You don't think we should do this. Like, I respect you, but we're doing it. Okay. And so, I always have people that they allow their kids to, to take out significant amount of debt, even if I dissuade them. So I appreciate that. So let's talk about some of the things that are not known when it comes to co-signing.
Well, so one thing is a lot of times, the co-signing, they'll talk about like co-signer release, right? Or they'll talk about, how, it's not that big of a deal. You can transfer the loan into somebody else's name. So for example, there's a couple lenders on studentloanplanner.com, Common Bonded and Laurel Road, that will transfer a co-signed loan out of the parent's name into the child's name, for example. So those are two common things that people don't really know about. The thing about co-signer release is I have a group of friends that are student loan attorneys, and we kind of go back and forth and talk shop sometimes. And they're basically like, show me, one positive experience with co-signer release, and I'll show you 10 that are unpleasant. So, in other words, like the easiest way to get rid of co-signer release is to refinance a loan into somebody else's name or to pay it off. So co-signer release is stated on a lot of loan docs and a lot of like marketing materials for banks, but in general, it's very, very difficult to get your name taken off of a loan because the bank's literally losing that security on you. So yes, that's one big point.
And, in the past, I used to tell my families that there's fine print in there that even if the student dies, you're obligated as a co-signer. But in some of the conversations I've had recently with private lenders, they've said, we've kind of moved away from that. We don't really do that anymore. What's your experience with that? Is that sort of an abandoned practice within the private lending industry now, or is it case by case, hit or miss, and some do it and some don't?
Well, it's being abandoned. I mean, there was recent legislation with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that changed a lot of things about taxability of forgiven debt for death and disability, and changed some rules about how, a loan can become immediately in default upon the death of, a co-signer, things like that. So there have been some big changes in the space. What I would just tell people, though, rather than just relying on what I'm going to tell them on a podcast, I would tell you just go to the promissory note. Everything in your loan is in the promissory note. And I would probably ask my lender for a PDF copy so you can search specific terms in the promissory note, right? So I can bring it up in Adobe and just press Control F on a PC and just say death and see what the thing says. Because whatever the promissory note says that you're signing is the way it's going to be.
That's a fantastic advice. And even for, students that are going through the Stafford Federal Rec student loan, you're going to have to do a master promissory note. And that's the contractual agreement there. That's what you're getting into. Now, what are some things that you've seen in various private loans in that promissory note that the lender may not be highlighting in neon lights and not necessarily wanting the co-signer to see that's in there when it comes to the fine print?
I mean, surprisingly, there's not really that much stuff in there that I view as kind of totally shocking besides the ones that you kind of mentioned.
Okay.
So, I think that the biggest danger is, I think a lot of times, this might sound kind of dumb, but like a lot of people don't really understand what co-signing means, right? Like, what you just said is, exactly what it means. But a lot of people think that what it really is they're doing something nice for a friend or a family member.
Like me.
And yeah, exactly. And so when you're co-signing, you're not helping somebody obtain a loan that they're going to pay. You are making a gift. And if you're okay gifting the person the full amount of money that you just signed for in cash with maybe, not too long of a notice period, then go ahead and co-sign. But if you're not prepared to literally gift that person that entire amount of money, then you can't co-sign. So that would be the biggest tripping point, is just, I think people need to understand that co-signing is a gift and you should expect it to be a gift. And if you are not prepared for it to be a gift, that means you can't co-sign.
I really think that puts it in perspective, because when I go back and I look at myself and I look at the mindset that I was in, right? I absolutely was not thinking that. I was thinking, I trust you and you need help and I care about you and I trust you. So why would I not help you? Now, I was pretty firm, like, I don't want to get stiffed, because I did understand that I would be obligated, but I thought the chances of this happening are like, what, 1%? On the upside, I'm helping you. On the downside, I have a 1% chance of a default. And I think, and it's the same for lending people money. I've learned this over the years, Travis. You lend somebody money, you get not just money, you loan them a book. You need to have the mindset that I may not see that book again, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's a gift, right? So that's funny. Yeah, think about how many tools people lend that are still sitting in their neighbor's garage.
Yes, absolutely. And I know I have quite a few people that owe me money right now because they were in a jam and I helped them out. But I'm learning. I've also finally learned to say no. And I had someone who called me and they're like, they're gonna repossess my car like within 24 hours if I can't make this car payment. Is there any way you can help? And because I'd been burned, not just this time, I actually got burned once over 11 grand. That was on a loan to a relative. And then this one was like 2,600. And so I'm slow, but you a couple times and you learn your lessons. You learn your lessons.
Well, I think when that kind of stuff happens, like what I try to do is if it's a friend, like my help and my support for you is free, because you're a friend, right? So I'm going to be there. I'm going to help you get through this. If you have questions about, what bankruptcy attorney to use, or you're being charged a fair price, like I'll help with that. But kind of, in my view, when somebody reaches out like that, unless it's sort of like a life and death kind of situation, like, some sort of medical treatment that someone's going to die from cancer over, like you're going to be fine, because that's what bankruptcy court's for. And that's what the models and the auto default rate kind of expect, is that a certain percentage of people are going to default. And there's way bigger problems in the world besides people defaulting on a car loan, as bad as that sounds to say.
No, it's true.
Next week in the news, what college admissions officers really want. And we'll be in chapter 102 of 171 answers. And the question is, should I complete the FAFSA if I'm wealthy? And next week's question is from a mom who wants to know how to guide a child with a learning disability through the college admissions process. And Mark will be in part 2 of 2 in his interview with Travis Hornsby in Student Loan Planner. And our college spotlight returns next week with Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas.
Hi, Nico. What do you got going on for New Year's? Any special plans? Are you gonna come to the ATL?
That's been our tradition, is to spend it with some very close friends every year. So I've been a little traumatized since we've been here in North Carolina.
You've been missing it. Missing your fix.
But yeah, so no, we do the home thing. We rarely go out because we're just not nightlife people. We just can't do it.
I'm not either.
We fall asleep really fast. So
I know. And you fall asleep on a podcast that I've been trying recording it at 11 p.m. with you too.
So no, we traditionally stay at home. It's a little different because we're not with our very closest friends, but it's okay. We talk a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm pumped because I got my brother coming in here with his, nieces and nephews from Denver, Colorado.
Aww.
And I'm going to spoil my nieces and nephews. And we're going to do some fine dining and go to show all the Atlanta places around and show them off. So
all right.
They're going to be getting here very shortly and we're excited.
Cool beans. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.